Well, here's a place that I have to admit that I respect those that speak with authority and give you a translation of Old Testament prophecy and say it as if it's 100% sure thing that that's exactly the way the prophecy should be interpreted, because I find some places where that's absolutely true that you can, but I also find an awful lot of places where it seems like the interpretation can be just as tricky as it is in the book of Revelation, where you have tremendous amount of symbols and colors and numbers that can be interpreted a lot of different ways. And so all we can do, I think, in a lot of these situations is divine speculation. Let me say that again for you, because I'm a big believer in this divine speculation, because I fear that many of these passages of Scripture can be interpreted and are interpreted by a number of different people in a number of different ways. But there are some similarities and some things that seem fairly constant. In any case, we're in Zechariah, and we're in chapters 9 through 14. Now, yesterday I neglected to set the backdrop properly. There's been almost 40 years since chapters 1 through 8. The temple's been finished. And now it seems that Zechariah has two basic messages. One is the rejection of the coming Messiah, and the other one is the reign of that Messiah. But I want to warn you that as you look at these chapters in Zechariah and some other places in Scripture in the Old Testament where we have prophecy, that these prophets were looking across mountaintops. In other words, they were looking at high points that God was revealing to them, which were short term, mid term, long term. And many times it seems that even from one verse to the next, you're seeing something that is either short term or extremely long term, just one verse after the other. So I find particularly chapter 10 a fascinating chapter, because it talks about a Messiah coming from amongst the people, which we know that Jesus did. And we know that he had a earthly mother, but a heavenly father. And we know that he came from the lineage of David, just as was prophesied that he would come. We know that he came with a peaceful message of love, mercy, and grace. And yet today in chapter 10, we see right after talking about the Messiah who came in peace and was bringing grace and a spiritual part to Israel, we find in chapter 10, immediately behind the coming Messiah, whether the first coming or the second coming, we find the fact that God would make Israel into a mighty war horse. And that's fascinating because, in fact, in relatively midterm, Israel has become a mighty force for such a little nation. As a nuclear power, it has a strong army that has shown its ability to take on its surrounding countries and win, in spite of its small size. At the same time, we also know in the end times, the nation of Israel will also win, and in a much bigger battle. So it becomes a little difficult to cut through all of the haze of this type or shadowy picture that we're given here by the prophet, whether we're talking about the 5-day war, the 7-day war, whether we're talking about the fact that it can withstand the pressures of Egypt and Iran and Iraq and Russia. We have a hard time cutting through all of that to see if in fact this prophecy in chapter 10 deals with the short term, shortly after the return of the nation from its bondage, if you will, through the German activities in Israel and at the concentration camps and so on, or whether it's looking out further long term towards the coming back of a nation um, in a final battle that's depicted in the book of Revelation. It's really difficult to say with a certainty that these verses may certainly have some bearing on both of those events. But in any case, I just want to look at a couple of verses with you, and you'll see what I'm talking about and see why it's difficult for anyone that's truly honest about this passage of Scripture to say, I know exactly what this means and exactly what the time frame is. And my anger is kindled against the shepherds, and I will punish the male goats, for the Lord of hosts has visited his flock, the house of Judah, and will make them like a majestic horse in battle. From them will come the cornerstone, from them the tent peg, from them the bow of battle, from them every ruler, all of them together. They will be mighty men, treading down the enemy in the mire of the streets and in battle, and they will fight, for the Lord will be with them, and the riders on the horses will be put to shame. I will strengthen the house of Judah, and I will save the house of Joseph, and I will bring them back, because I have had compassion on them, and they will be as though I had not rejected them, for I am the Lord their God, and I will answer them. Well, you can certainly see why there can be some confusion and why there can be some bold statements about what chapter 10 is talking about. We certainly know that there have been many false prophets, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and even now false prophets. And so we know that there are. We also know that Jesus came from the people of Israel with Mary, his earthly mother, and the Holy Spirit, his father. We also know that he will give guidance and direction, but we know in his first coming, he came in peace, mercy, and grace, that he'll come in his second coming as the ruler, King of kings and Lord of lords. And we know the battles that are depicted in the book of Revelation. So we see the possibility of both long and short-term prophecies here. We also know the term cornerstone. You only have to go to Matthew chapter 21, verse 42, or into Psalms to find Jesus being referred to as the cornerstone. And certainly he can be referred to as the peg, those things that are stable and strengthen the nation of Judah. So we know that this can be taken both in long term and short term as prophecy. We know that it can be fit into the events that we know have occurred or will occur. I have always been fascinated by the wars that have occurred since the nation of Israel was regathered into Israel after the Germans had taken so many of the people away. What's fascinating about the nation of Israel is the fact that on a couple of occasions they've been taken down to a remnant. In each case, they've built back up into a big and mighty nation. So we know that God has his hand upon the nation of Israel. There's no way you can explain some of the wars that have occurred. No way you can explain just 50,000 returning after Babylonian captivity. No way you can explain why that little nation would be such a powerful nation today, or have the support of the followers of Christ in America saying the nation of Israel must always stand, and why America has been designated as almost a protector and an ally to protect the nation of Israel until God's timing is perfect, is a fascinating kind of thing, because we have on numerous occasions stuck our necks out as a nation to defend the little nation of Israel, which we have not done so forcefully for many other small nations who have been tromped upon by other enemies such as Russia and other surrounding countries. So it's a fascinating thing when you start to think about how this cornerstone came out of the people of Israel, how he will be one that not only came in grace, mercy, and truth and salvation, but he's coming again to lead in the final battle that will bring on the final millennium reign and the eternal reign of Christ as King and Lord of all. Uh, Fascinating passage of Scripture. I encourage you to read Zechariah. I encourage you to read a number of different commentaries by a number of different sources, for there's a great difference of opinion on how to interpret chapter 10. But we do know that the events that are foretold will come to pass, and that God is with this little nation of Israel. And if we look at prophecies such as Micah 4:5 and others that support this section of Scripture, we recognize that God is on his throne. His timetable is not our timetable. We have lots of question marks around when these events have occurred or will occur. But we do know that they are going to be fulfilled in hindsight, just as now we can see the coming of the Messiah, his death on the cross and his resurrection, and his ruling and reigning in heaven, and the promise of his coming back again. All of those things are easy to see in hindsight, and maybe chapter 10, well, chapter 9 and 10, and the rest of the book of Zechariah will become very, very clear to those that live long enough to see the details played out. But I hope that you'll recognize that God's on his throne, that the nation of Israel is a key to all of that's going on in prophecy and all that will occur in end times. And that's my thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.